James, I wanted to start with you first. Empathy is such a strong theme throughout this film, and you've done such a brilliant job highlighting how mental health not only affects those who are struggling with it, but everybody around them. And I know this narrative was inspired by a play. Did that source material also focus heavily on all these different perspectives, or was that something that you added in as you brought this project to the screen? And why was it so important for you to highlight?
Yeah, so the play totally incorporated all of the same sort of topics and emotional pillars throughout the story of the play, as well as the family dynamics. I changed a couple of the family dynamics to do a couple of tricks I wanted to see on screen, but certainly shares the same heart. For me, I grew up, post Columbine. I grew up kind of doing weird lockdown drills in middle school and in high school and rehearsing exit strategies and having that vague
Mm.
paranoia of like, could this actually happen? And then as I was kind of coming of age, still in film school, as a young adult, Sandy Hook happens back in 2012, and it was very affecting for me and very obviously very affecting for the country. And those headlines never went away. But from my perspective, and even from Josh Adele, who was the playwright of The Mental State, we felt like those headlines weren't really capturing the full essence of a story like this. Not to
Mm.
these topics like teenage mental health and sort of the lack of resources, especially for rural areas and families coming from lower economic status.
Yeah.
um, we felt like it wasn't really capturing the full breadth of empathy needed for these sort of stories. And I was introduced to the play through my girlfriend at the time, Remington Moses, who's a fantastic actress, and she's plays Counselor Melanie Hansen and is now my wife. And she knew Josh Adele as a drama teacher and introduced me to him in the play. We met, we really shared the same heart around this subject matter and took it from there. And here we are.
It's a brilliant film. And Alyssa, your character is so immensely protective of her family. She always puts them first, particularly her nephew. But internally, she's struggling with her own grief. But you brought so much depth and nuance to that contrast. What was your preparation like getting into that mindset and making sure these different colors and layers are conveyed through your performance?
Hmm. Thank you. Yeah, I think it always comes from building a backstory, a brother who's committed suicide. There's so much to that. So you have to create that relationship growing up together and how we
Mm.
related to one another. And really make that relationship as rich as possible so that then the loss of that is affecting, and that's happened fairly recently when the film opens, and on top of that grief, and that's a tough grief if someone has
Yeah.
taken their own life and they've had mental health issues, because I think the very natural question that a lot of people ask themselves was, could I have done something to stop it? And then you see that question play out in real time when it comes to her nephew Andy and her noticing, wait a second, there are some similar patterns here, and I need to do everything I can to try to protect him. And at the same time, there's also the question of, I can't just kidnap him. That's not an option. He does have a mum and she's sober, and Dana wants to respect that, but at the same time I think she's pretty opinionated with how the parenting is happening. And James referred to just a lack of resources available, and
Mhm.
that conflict, there's so much there. And what I look for if I'm going to sign on to a role is like, and that beautiful complexity was just a real gift as an actress. Yeah.
You're fantastic in this. And James, you have such an incredible performances across the board from your entire cast. This project really doesn't work unless you have the right actor playing Andy. What was it about Jance's original audition that made him stand out amongst them?
It's so hard to describe that for some actors. Like for Alyssa specifically, when she came in, like I just saw that she was a really fantastic listener. She was very present and very understanding of the character, but also a really fantastic
Mm.
listener. And I thought for Dana, that was something that was like super necessary to have. And Alyssa's just like very naturally good at that as a person and also as a performer. And when Jance came in, Jance, he just really, with this sort of film, I had to give some of the harder scenes as audition material because we had to see, if they could handle that, especially because they're still, Jance and even Allison and Blaine and the other younger characters, they're still young actors now, but we shot this quite a few years ago, actually, just the way indie films sometimes goes, and they were younger then. And Jance just had a really great maturity about how to handle the emotional moments of those scenes, to understand the depth and the importance of a story like this, and
Mm.
but also being able to not necessarily need to carry that throughout his day afterwards, right? Like, I think you hear a lot of stories with characters that are maybe similar to this, where where you could see like maybe the quote unquote method actors who maybe stay in it for too long, but Jance was just really very mature actor of being able to jump into these big emotional moments, understand the depth of them, and then being able to take himself out and have his own healthy relationship. He and I met in person and then had dinner together, and he just kind of went over a lot of the stories that he had that were kind of similar to and
Mm.
relating to a story like this. So.
Great answer. And Alyssa, one of my favorite techniques in filmmaking is the use of silence. And your character in particular says so much without having to use a lot of dialogue. And her body language and facial expressions create so many impactful moments throughout the film. What was it like getting to collaborate with James to find those moments of silence?
Well, I think one of the things that helps with any silence is just the story and the writing. The circumstances that you find yourself in, if those are all full and rich, then you don't really need to push a whole lot, and you
Mm.
can sit back and let the audience see it. And I think that's a very smart technique in filmmaking as well. Me personally, I don't have a very good poker face. I think that's what makes me a good actor, but I just don't in real life. I think a lot of people can figure out how I'm feeling by the look on my face.
James, there's also so much vulnerability that you're asking for your cast with this film. As a co-writer and director, how did you create the space and trust with them to tackle this emotional and really important narrative?
I just tried to be as open as possible as far as collaboration. I just tried to let them know that I'm very open to, I just tried to keep conversations open on set. Anytime that an actor was feeling uncomfortable, whether it was within the scene or just wanted a snack or something, just just tried to stay as open as a collaborator as I could. And, I think that's a really important thing for every director to do, especially in dramas, because so much of it is relying on the characters and the actors themselves.
Mm.
And at the end of the day, I could sit there as one of the co-writers and even with the other writers, and we can try to think of like, what is this character going to say, or how are they going to behave in this situation, or what have you. And going to the actor who's playing that character and is sitting and living in that one specific character, they come up to you and say, I don't think this really works this way. You have to listen because they're the ones sitting there with that character. So I just tried to stay open, collaborative, and I think it also kind of doing that helped lead to one of my favorite scenes in the film, which is kind of near the end, the sort of family argument that
Mm.
happens between Alyssa's character and Carly Pope's character and Michael Gladys's character. That was written very differently. And then the day that we were shooting, or the couple days before even, I sat down with Alyssa and Carly and Michael because they all had thoughts about the scene, and we kind of ended up rewriting it, kind of devising it all as a group, and it just made the scene so much stronger, and it allowed each of those characters to really sit in that moment, such an important moment to see this family break apart,
Yeah.
um, very well. So just trying to be open and collaborative.
One of my favorite scenes in the film as well. And Alyssa, you've worked on projects of all sizes. What is it about independent filmmaking that excites you as a creative and a storyteller?
I think for me that there's even more of a feeling of family on set, you know, which you tend to have anyway. You're going to work day in and day out, and all the crew members are there every morning, you know, and you're spending a lot of time together. But I think one of the things with independent film is that you're not as separated. We're not all in our own trailers, where our holding room is the living room of a house and there's a fire going because it's, you know, late fall in upstate New York, and we're hanging out together and discussing the scenes ahead of time in a way that I think, you know, we just have more time and contact and engaging with one another. And it's one of the things that I love about film in general, is that collaboration and everyone getting together, and you know, you can sit and have your point of view from your character, and then some other actor who's thought about theirs, and they have this beautiful idea, and you're just like, oh my God, I never even thought about that. It's like so exciting to me when those things happen, and when mistakes happen and you stumble on something. You know, it's yeah, I just love filmmaking, I love acting, and yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the most beautiful things about filmmaking is it is meant to be entertaining and provide that escapism, but it also is a medium that can spark a lot of really necessary conversations about timely subject matter, which this project undoubtedly does. What do you each hope audiences take away after they see this? And James, for you in particular, you've taken it around the festival circuit and seen those conversations and that impact firsthand. What has that meant for you?
Well, it's been fantastic to see audience members kind of react the way I've been hoping, and the other storytellers have been hoping, you know, which is mostly to just kind of grow a sense of empathy and compassion around these sort of stories, around these sort of tragic events, and a greater understanding that there are these sort of hurricane of factors that could lead into this. Again, to not generalize, but to understand that there's, you know, a big scope of issues that lead to these sort of events, and a lot of people involved, and to kind of continue that communication within an audience and within a community to discuss, you know, okay, what are some ways we can maybe make a change, or how are ways that we can go and talk to people if they need help, and how can others sort of ask for that help as well. So yeah, I mean, I think my three big pillars for this has always been just growing that empathy, compassion, and communication through this.
James said that beautifully. You know, this is why I act. It's to make people think about things and approach it in a different way, to also increase empathy. You see someone in a situation that you know nothing about. That's the beauty of storytelling to me. So I'm kind of just piggybacking off of what James said, because he expressed it really well.
Yeah.